Have you ever wondered why the more you analyze situations, replay conversations, and reconsider every possible outcome, the more stuck you begin to feel? Overthinking often appears responsible and intelligent. You tell yourself that you are being careful, that you are avoiding mistakes, that you are preparing thoroughly. Yet beneath that careful reflection, there may be an illusion of control. The hidden cost of overthinking is not only stress. It includes delayed decisions, missed opportunities, reduced confidence, and persistent self-doubt. In this episode, you will explore how excessive analysis can gradually undermine your success and weaken your momentum. You will also expand your English vocabulary while gaining practical insight into your own cognitive habits. Success is rarely the result of endless preparation. It is built through clarity, resilience, and decisive action. And overthinking quietly interferes with all three in subtle but significant ways. And if this lesson gave you something useful, I'd love it if you tapped like and subscribe to the channel. It helps you stay connected, and it also helps this little learning community grow. Every click really does make a difference. With love, let's dive in. What is overthinking really? Overthinking is not the same as thoughtful reflection. Reflection is purposeful and constructive. Overthinking begins when your mind becomes trapped in repetition without reaching resolution. You replay past conversations, revise your responses, and anticipate scenarios that may never materialize. Instead of clarity, you experience rumination, a cycle of repeated thoughts that feel urgent but produce no progress. It can feel productive because you are mentally active. However, no clear decision is made. Overthinking consumes cognitive energy while reducing effectiveness. The mind becomes overstimulated, tense, and unsettled. You may struggle to relax, even when there is no immediate problem. Healthy thinking guides you toward action. Overthinking leads to hesitation and emotional fatigue. When analysis replaces movement, it transforms from a helpful tool into a psychological barrier that restricts forward progress and weakens confidence. Why does overthinking feel so safe? Overthinking feels safe because it creates the perception that you are minimizing risk. When you analyze every variable, you believe you are protecting yourself from failure. This perception, however, can be deceptive. It shields you from discomfort more than it shields you from mistakes. Action involves uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers vulnerability. By remaining in contemplation, you avoid exposure to unpredictable outcomes. Yet you also avoid growth. Overthinking becomes a subtle avoidance strategy disguised as responsibility. You convince yourself that you are being rational, when in fact you may be postponing necessary action. Growth requires resilience and adaptability. These qualities develop through experience, not through endless mental rehearsal. The safety you feel while overthinking is temporary. The consequences of inaction, however, can accumulate gradually and limit long-term potential. How does overthinking damage confidence? Confidence is cultivated through repeated action, not prolonged contemplation. Each time you act, you gather evidence of your competence and reinforce your sense of capability. When you overthink, you delay that evidence. You question your judgment, imagine unfavorable outcomes, and amplify potential risks. Gradually, your self-trust begins to erode. You may believe that you need complete certainty before proceeding. Yet confidence rarely originates from certainty. It emerges from engaging with uncertainty and adapting along the way. Overthinking keeps you in theory instead of practice. The longer you hesitate, the more intimidating simple decisions appear. Minor tasks can feel overwhelming. The widening gap between intention and behavior generates frustration and internal criticism. Over time, this pattern can significantly undermine self-esteem and reduce your willingness to take initiative. Why does overthinking block success? Success depends on momentum, adaptability, and consistent execution. Overthinking interrupts that momentum by replacing action with analysis. You wait for optimal timing, perfect preparation, or complete reassurance before moving forward. Meanwhile, opportunities evolve and circumstances change. Overthinking often leads to analysis paralysis, a state where reflection becomes excessive and prevents progress. When hesitation becomes habitual, advancement slows dramatically. Success rarely results from flawless planning alone. It emerges from courageous implementation and continuous adjustment. The world continues progressing whether you act or remain passive. If you remain trapped in contemplation, you risk limiting your own potential. Decisive action generates clarity and experience. Overanalysis prolongs uncertainty and reinforces doubt. In the long term, it is not lack of intelligence that restricts success, but reluctance to move despite uncertainty. What is the emotional cost of living inside constant analysis? The emotional cost of overthinking is often gradual but profound. When your mind is constantly evaluating, predicting, and reconsidering, your nervous system remains in a subtle state of tension. You may not notice it immediately, yet your body reacts to imagined risks as if they were real threats. This continuous anticipation elevates stress levels and disrupts emotional regulation. Sleep can become lighter, concentration weaker, and patience shorter. Over time, mental exhaustion accumulates. You might feel drained even after a quiet day because your thoughts never truly paused. Overthinking shifts your attention away from the present moment and anchors it in hypothetical futures or unresolved past events. As a result, genuine relaxation becomes rare. This persistent internal pressure reduces clarity and resilience. What begins as careful reflection gradually transforms into chronic stress that quietly undermines well-being and emotional stability. Is overthinking actually rooted in fear? In many cases, overthinking originates from fear that has not been acknowledged directly. It may be fear of failure, fear of criticism, or fear of making an irreversible mistake. Instead of confronting that fear openly, the mind converts it into detailed analysis. Analysis appears rational and controlled. It feels responsible. Yet beneath that rational surface, there may be insecurity or doubt. The longer you evaluate every possible scenario, the more exaggerated potential risks become. Minor uncertainties can start to appear catastrophic. This cognitive distortion intensifies hesitation and weakens confidence. Fear expands when it is left unexamined. Overthinking gives it continuous attention and space to grow. Recognizing fear as the underlying driver restores perspective. Once identified, it becomes manageable rather than overwhelming, and you regain the capacity to respond with courage instead of avoidance. Why do intelligent people tend to overthink more frequently? Intelligent individuals often perceive complexity more clearly than others. They identify subtle variables, anticipate consequences, and generate multiple possible outcomes. This cognitive strength is valuable in many situations. However, without decisiveness, it can lead to stagnation. When you consider too many alternatives, choosing one path becomes increasingly difficult. This pattern often results in analysis paralysis, where reflection replaces execution. Intelligence without implementation limits growth. You may understand the correct strategy conceptually, yet still hesitate to apply it. True intelligence includes discernment, the ability to evaluate information and then proceed confidently. Strategic thinking should facilitate progress, not obstruct it. When contemplation becomes excessive, it disrupts momentum and reduces efficiency. The objective is not to suppress thought, but to channel it productively and align it with purposeful action. How can you recognize when thinking becomes excessive? You can recognize excessive thinking by observing its outcomes and emotional impact. Constructive reflection leads to resolution and clarity. Overthinking leads to confusion and delay. If your thoughts increase anxiety rather than confidence, that is a clear indicator. If days pass without a decision, hesitation may be dominating your process. You might repeat the same internal questions without reaching a conclusion. Seeking reassurance repeatedly without feeling satisfied is another sign. Physical symptoms can also appear, such as muscle tension, restlessness, or difficulty sleeping. These psychological and physiological responses signal that your mind is overstimulated. Awareness is essential. Once you identify the pattern, you regain agency over your reactions. Conscious recognition allows you to interrupt rumination and replace it with deliberate, constructive action. What happens when you take action before feeling fully prepared? When you act before achieving complete certainty, you often discover that readiness develops afterward. The first step may feel uncomfortable and expose vulnerability. Doubt may still exist. Yet once you engage with reality, your perception shifts significantly. You receive practical feedback instead of relying on hypothetical predictions. Even imperfect results provide valuable experience and cultivate resilience. Action reduces the authority of fear and reinforces self-trust. With repetition, decisiveness becomes less intimidating and more natural. Adaptability increases because you learn to respond to real circumstances rather than imagined threats. Preparation remains important, but excessive preparation delays growth. Readiness is rarely a prerequisite for success. More often, it is the outcome of courageous engagement with uncertainty and consistent forward movement. How can you reduce overthinking in your daily routine? Reducing overthinking begins with creating intentional limits for your mental energy. When your thoughts are allowed to expand without boundaries, they easily turn into endless rumination. One practical strategy is to establish a clear time frame for making decisions. By defining a deadline, you prevent prolonged hesitation and encourage decisive action. Structure strengthens discipline and restores momentum. Another effective method is writing your thoughts down. Externalizing concerns makes them appear more manageable and less overwhelming. It also increases objectivity, allowing you to evaluate situations calmly instead of emotionally. Focusing on the immediate next step rather than the entire outcome reduces cognitive overload. Trying to control every possible variable intensifies anxiety. Breaking tasks into smaller, achievable stages builds confidence gradually. Over time, these consistent habits reshape thinking patterns, strengthen self-regulation, and reduce excessive contemplation. Why is imperfection more powerful than perfectionism? Perfectionism often disguises itself as ambition, yet it frequently fuels overthinking. When you insist on flawless conditions before acting, hesitation becomes inevitable. The pursuit of perfection creates unrealistic expectations that delay progress. Imperfect action, however, generates experience and insight. Each attempt, even if imperfect, provides feedback that refines your approach. Growth depends on adaptability and resilience, not rigid standards. Perfectionism encourages constant evaluation before movement, convincing you that mistakes are unacceptable. Yet mistakes are essential components of learning and innovation. When you accept imperfection, psychological pressure decreases and productivity increases. Overthinking thrives on the demand for certainty. Letting go of absolute control allows space for creativity and strategic adjustment. Progress emerges from consistent engagement, not from waiting for ideal circumstances that may never arrive. How does presence interrupt the cycle of overthinking? Presence anchors your awareness in the current moment, reducing the intensity of mental noise. Overthinking usually projects you into imagined futures or unresolved past experiences. When attention returns to what is happening now, rumination loses momentum. Mindfulness strengthens emotional regulation by narrowing focus to one specific task or sensation. The mind cannot fully worry and fully concentrate simultaneously. This shift restores clarity and balance. Even brief moments of intentional awareness can reduce cognitive overload. Observing your breathing, noticing your surroundings, or engaging fully in one activity interrupts repetitive thought patterns. Presence does not eliminate thinking, but it transforms your relationship with it. Instead of being controlled by automatic analysis, you become the observer. This perspective enhances discernment and supports deliberate, confident action. What would your life look like without constant overanalysis? Without chronic overthinking, your daily experiences would feel lighter and more intentional. Decisions would become clearer and less emotionally exhausting. Opportunities would inspire curiosity instead of apprehension. Confidence would expand through repeated engagement rather than depend on certainty. Relationships might improve because you would not reinterpret every detail repeatedly. Mental space would increase, allowing creativity and innovation to emerge naturally. Emotional energy would no longer be consumed by hypothetical risks. Instead of rehearsing scenarios mentally, you would participate in them directly. Freedom is not the absence of thought, but liberation from compulsive analysis. When excessive contemplation decreases, resilience and adaptability increase. You begin responding to life rather than resisting it. That shift transforms not only your productivity, but also your overall well-being. Are you ready to replace hesitation with decisive action? You do not need to eliminate thinking entirely. You need to guide it with intention and discipline. Overthinking loses influence when awareness and consistent execution replace prolonged hesitation. Clarity develops through movement. Confidence is reinforced through repeated effort. Success is constructed through disciplined courage and adaptability. Each time you act despite uncertainty, you strengthen your self-efficacy and reinforce resilience. Absolute certainty is not required for progress. Commitment and flexibility are sufficient. When you replace rumination with implementation, your mindset transforms. You begin trusting your capacity to navigate outcomes rather than predict them perfectly. Overthinking may still appear occasionally, but it no longer dictates your decisions. Think strategically, act deliberately, and allow real experience to refine your path forward. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next lesson. Your support means so much. It keeps this space alive and growing. With love. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to continue this journey with you.